Welcome to Lost to the Nails, episode 16. A theme is winning. That's the title we just decided on after I tripped over several of these, and we're off to a good start here. Eric, man, how have you been?
So it's been a busy couple months.
Yes, it has.
Per usual, the
Yeah.
Lost to the Nails way is to go, oh, we haven't recorded in actually a really unconscionably long time.
Yes.
I came to the realization recently that like the last thing I painted was in February, and it is
Ooh.
no longer February, and my nice and comfy margin of error between me and Nova has shrunk to like, oh, I need to get going.
Oh, wow.
So what happened in the interim is I had two doctoral students who decided to graduate, and in the process, that meant reading and editing two dissertations. That, along with the rest of my job, sort of consumed my life. Brian, where have you been?
Yeah. I like your note that you wrote last night. Brian, quote, waves vaguely at life. That's pretty true. I had some struggle stuff with my kid, who's kind of having a rough go of things, but yeah, also kind of fell into the hobby slump as well. Like I just painted, I think I posted something finally. There were 15 assault Marines that I was going to paint for an event that I didn't go to. That I remember when I looked, because I keep a journal where I keep track of everything that I do. And I've been like building stuff and printing things and doing some stuff and everything. But I think my gap was when I worked out the math, it was something like, oh God, what was it? It was March 6th to May 11th. It was too long. It was really too long. And it was one of those things where my kid had a meltdown and snapped off chain axes on 5 of those assault Marines. And I just kind of like cashed out of reality after that. I was just like, I'm not going to look at those so that my child survives to 9. And, and that was that. But I am finally back on the hobby horse. We'll get into that a little bit later. But
Yeah, I think it's a telling sign that both of us had events we signed up for and then bailed out of.
yeah,
In terms of where we were at, because I was supposed to be at the Tacoma Open,
yeah,
and I was just like, I can't. Nope, I can't. And even with I had signed up for the Legions Imperialis event, and I was like, well, I can't paint a whole new army for that. I'm not gonna. And then I got the wait list for the narrative event, which I do have a painted army for, came up, and I was still like, I don't have time.
yeah,
So yeah, I
yeah,
think it's a bad sign that both of us had events we were excited and looking forward to, and bailed on both of them.
yeah, yeah. It was just one of those things where it wasn't just that I didn't finish the stuff that I wanted painted for it. It was also that it was just a mental bandwidth thing. And I was like, I don't want to drag out old stuff. And,
Yeah.
I mean, cause I have a big painted army that I could have brought, but it's like, it's not doing what I wanted to do. And it's not how I wanted to go. So it didn't feel right. Just sold the ticket off and that's that. But the fire has been relit. So I think when they always have summer events around here for those. So I'm aiming to try to make one of those. So,
Yeah. And we'd like to tell you from now on it will be different, and we will be a regular podcast with a clear schedule. But if any of you have hung around with us for 16 episodes, you know that's a lie. And so we're not
yeah,
gonna. Lost in the Nails comes out when it comes out.
yeah, it happens when it's the right time,
Yeah,
when
exactly.
it's damn good and ready. So I think there's a person that I'll thank a little bit later. I think they wrote in a review of the show, it was the occasional 30K 40K podcast or something along those lines, and I was like, that's pretty accurate. But
It's not wrong.
I'll have more to say about that guy, because man, so he really helped me out with messaging and some printing and things like that.
Yeah,
So
we're going with the Gandalf principle of we're neither early nor late. We record precisely when we mean to.
there it is. So we've had it's been a while since we recorded, and man, Heresy Plastics got a little busy, eh?
Yeah, so two whole ass new heresy armies have come out. There's the Solar Exilia, and as of I think yesterday, the Plastic Mechanicum, which took me by surprise, primarily because of the Cattle Guard tank, which I assumed had drifted off into the realm of models that we will never see again. But
Yeah,
instead, it's out in plastic.
yeah, that thing's That I've always loved that tank, and it coming out in plastic just right out of the chute. I was like, bold move, man. The it, I have wanted to do a World Eaters Pravian so freaking bad for so long, and if they're going to go ahead and do those, what are those called? Are they Castellex? Is that what they are?
Yeah, the
Yeah, if
Castellex.
they're doing those in plastic, and if they do the jam where it's like they're in a box of two or whatever the deal is, like I'm all over that. That
Yeah,
that has to happen.
I think you're going to see a lot of Pravians and a lot of Ally Mechanicum detachments
Yep.
because they're
Yeah.
cool models.
And then other than that, we got the Solar Auxilia came out and are kind of out in the wild doing their thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I have enough of those for I think a Zone Mortalis army, which is my great lie I tell to myself is it's just a Zone Mortalis army.
Hmm.
But I really like those, and I do like that we're now seeing the factions that aren't T4 3-up armor save stuff because I think you'll see a lot more like, oh, that's what this gun is for.
Yeah.
Where it starts getting, I think, way more interesting. And you start having a really hard cap on like you can play Space Marines and a bunch of stuff is in plastic, or there's these niche armies that are both going to be wildly expensive and in resin.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited that those are in plastic. I also think it helps the whole heresy isn't dead notion to have actual releases
Hmm.
come out for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now on the 40K side, we're recording this on the 19th. I'm not paying attention to dates anymore. I'm paying attention to how many contract days I have left in my teaching year, and the number on that is 10. Um, we just had, I believe today's the 19th. Yesterday was the 18th. That's when they showed the preview. We got some 40K stuff, so you've got one that you're happy about.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about the Flying Nun. We finally have a Canoness with a jump pack. That has been something that the sisters I think have been missing for a long time. The
Hmm.
both the Seraphim and the Zephyrim are really cool model kits that actually have interesting play and aren't just weaker assault marines. And the problem with them has always been, but they're unsupported by characters. So if they
Yeah.
run into anything beefy, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
And so I like that we now have a Canoness with a jump pack. I think it opens up some new options. It looks like definitely going to be at least an army box and then probably a detachment that's essentially all jump pack girls all the time. I think that could be a fun army to play. And I think that having that character there gives you something other than like, well, I took a Canoness, I took a Palatine, I put them in different squads.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, I'm done.
The end.
And
Yeah.
so I like that it's there. I like that one of the things I like the most about those units are they're thematically, because that's the theme of this episode. They're not necessarily built on the idea of martyrdom. And so you can't actually just do like Sisters of Battle doing cool shit as a
Yeah.
as a theme. And so I really like that that's there. It looks like it's got a ton of options. There's at the very least the sort of classic pistol and power sword. Then there's somebody with a big fuck off eviscerator, and that's exciting. And so I'm really curious as to what the options for that will be, what the builds will that for that will be, and
Hmm.
if they'll have sort of good synergies with those two units.
Yeah. And then last week, the shockingly early Chaos Space Marine um, Codex went on pre-order. We're getting two new Chaos Lords, and I think those are the only new models, if I remember correctly. We've got a Jump Lord that's back, and we have a big brawler on foot and whatnot. I my part of my plan this year was like I kind of had things like this is what I want to do this year for hobby, and always subject to change, of course. But part of it was I want to get my Black Legion. I want to paint core things so that the summer when the codex drops, I'll be ready to go, and can kind of just add stuff and make an army that makes sense based on the new codex. And they decided to release it, and I mean, I guess it'll be out. No, it will be out in May. It's going to be out next weekend. So yeah, that's just too early for my boat. So I'm like, well, it looks like I'll be playing World Eaters for a bit until I paint a lot more stuff. But yeah, we'll us there are previews that are out there. I don't have a copy of this thing. I don't get that stuff anymore, any of that stuff. So we'll talk about that when we go. We're going to go into we're going to close out with a segment where we both kind of talk about 40K because we've been having some like conversations back and forth a little bit on this, and also with other people as well to kind of tie that in. So, um, as far as other hobby type stuff, I I just got back on the hobby horse. I mean, I've been building things and doing things. I think last time when we talked, I was having problems with my printer, and I so I there's a guy that the guy I was talking about, Mark, that messaged us and or like that called it the occasional 40K podcast or whatever it was, which I thought was great. Um, Designs files on Cults 3D and kind of set me some recommendations for things. I don't want to give out his name because I know that like with 3D printing stuff, there's like a Fight Club thing with, doing whatever. But if he tells me afterwards to link his stuff, I'll do that. But was kind of giving me some great advice and linking to some things. And man, I hate to say it, I feel like such a moron. I wasn't putting my stuff on the build plate at a 45-degree angle for whatever reason. I, so I had been doing that the whole time, and then all of a sudden I was like, why aren't any of my prints sticking? Why aren't any of them sticking? And they're all falling off. The supports are there. What's going on? And that literally was all it was. It was pretty sad.
Stuff like that happens, though.
It does happen. Yeah, that was a sign that my life was just too busy and doing the thing. But yeah, other than that, like I mentioned, the heretical hangover that the Bay Area Horse Heresy group had, I tried to go to it, didn't get stuff done. That's that. But speaking of 3D printers, Eric.
So yeah, the last episode we sort of talked about, I was flirting with a new 3D printer. You had just got the Saturn, and I was like, a bigger build plate sure would be nice. And I had complained at the time that Epax, who was the folks who made my first 3D printer, I love their build quality is really high. They're a small company, so you get pretty good support from them. It's made in the USA, et cetera, et cetera. But they had just gotten wildly behind the times, and had essentially this sort of second and third generation printers, like the one you have. They just skipped that, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to pay actually a fair amount of money for an obsolete printer. So
Yeah.
literally, while I was on the Elegoo site with a Saturn in my shopping cart, I get an email from Epax that's like, "Hey, we're releasing a new version of our E10, which is the same sort of size printer as a Saturn. Uh, Pre-orders now." And it looked good. It's slightly larger than Saturn, but not by any meaningful amount.
Okay.
It's slightly higher resolution. It's all the normal Epax stuff. One of the things I liked about my Epax printer is it had an upgrade path to it. So like I have disassembled that printer and put a new screen in twice, and that's just worked.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, I suppose I have to put my money where my mouth is. So I pre-ordered that. It arrived pretty fast. It's great. It had the usual new printer teething problems, where there's something about the ergonomics of it that make me not remember to tighten the build plate back. I think because it's
Weird.
two pieces of machined, I believe, aluminum,
Mm-hmm.
and as you put them together, it's a pretty tight fit. So it feels like the build plate's secure, but you
Oh,
still need to tighten it down,
right.
or
Right.
you will get several failures. Ask me how
Wow.
I know. So, being the type of person who has bought a label maker under the errant belief that simply being able to label things will mean I'm organized, I now have a large label on the front of the cover that is just like, is the build plate tight? Um, so it also says front toward enemy.
Right.
But that has been going really well. I finally got it calibrated. I've been printing stuff for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll talk a little bit about it in games. But I have been printing a bunch of stuff for that for various different skirmish games. Some terrain I owe Colin so he can finish out the commission I have him doing for me for Legions Imperialis stuff for people trying to get into it. And then my club has been uh, planning a sometime in June, because ironically I'm traveling on June 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime in June, 80th anniversary of D-Day Historicals Day.
Mm.
Um, that has meant printing historicals terrain. So I've got,
Yeah.
yeah, 20 telegraph poles and some wrecked tanks and a bunch of other stuff that I've just been printing out to make those boards look good, because the whole point of
Right.
historicals is your board should look good.
Right.
And so that has been what I've been primarily doing. That means I now have basically an infinite hobby backlog. But also that is sort of the a good, I'm incredibly busy hobby activity, because I can lie to myself when I'm getting things done, because I pressed two buttons, a machine made some noise, and then I went back to work. And
Yeah.
I'm like, but I did hobby stuff. So
True.
yeah, been doing a lot of 3D printing.
Cool. Yeah. I ended up finding, um, so the guy that I was talking about was kind of messaging me and giving me advice. There was a lot of the thing that I really, we'll get into this when we get into like theming armies and stuff. Cause like with my World Eaters army, the thing I struggled with was all of my old stuff is the old Wee Marine scale, early Forge World stuff. And it just doesn't line up. And I love the Mark II stuff and mixing Mark II things with parts from other stuff. And, anyways, there are a lot of like really good World Eaters and Warhound specific parts that you can do, and then also parts that you can use for upgrading like the current Mark IIIs and things like that. So there was an episode a while back where you made a Zone Mortalis list for me with like the completely counter the what was it? It was a Remistos with a heavy flamer because World Eaters and sticking them with like boarding marines and things like that, or
Mm-hmm.
breachers. And speaking of Colin, I need to ship him. The first ones that I sent were not the correct scale for the new Mark III plastic. So I printed them at 90%. And in true, this is how I do things. I the nails were ticking, and I printed all 20 shields and all 20 arms and all 20 bolters all at the same time, and then got them out. And I was like, wow, these guys can scratch the bottom of their knees without bending over. So I'm going to need to scale these down a little bit. So the old ones, though, with all of Colin's like true scale stuff, will actually work pretty well. So
Yeah,
um,
there's a ton of files out there for especially the World Eaters and
mhm.
Warhounds. It's particularly vibrant, but there is always that issue with scaling, because everybody made like
Yeah,
true scale, but there is no definition for true scale.
right.
So like there's a set of Mark IV legs I had that I printed out. I was like, oh, 95 will be fine. Like, it was a little smaller. They look like
Mhm.
they're wearing mom jeans.
Yeah.
Like the 2/3 of their entire body is their legs, and I'm like, yeah, that's not correct. Can't, absolutely not. So yeah, there's always a bit of a like, but
Yeah.
how big do we want these to be? But yeah, there's a ton of files out there, which is nice for
So,
that. And if there's ever a legion that works with the like pick and mix assortment of armor you pulled out of a pile,
oh God,
it's
yes.
it's the World Eaters.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there was one of my World Eaters in the first 10 assault marines that I painted. One of the guys has a chain axe and a chain sword, and I'm like, yeah, this is, probably came from somebody else.
Yeah.
But it filled an itchy hand, and we're going back to work. But yeah, they I think I mentioned last time that there was like a file that I bought for like true scale. They look like red butchers, but they're a little more static. Like they aren't quite as, sound of music out in the meadow dancing around posed and everything. But there were five that I printed that were like way too big. And then I was looking at I'm finishing up the last of my 8-bound models that I have. And I was looking at some of them. I'm like, these arms actually look like they'll fit them pretty well. And so I want to do a unit of Exalted 8-bound using those Terminator bodies, but then I'll just have like the bare arms and, heads and whatnot, just to make a unit of 6 that looks a little bit different. I figure I'll paint them up like the uh, the devoured unit that they write about, the Angron's bodyguard that he ignored. So they're
Yeah,
like in
that
a
sounds
gold
awesome.
army, armor, and I figured I would do like red kind of demonic skin and stuff like that. So just to have one unit that's different. I mean, I don't know that I'm ever going to field 3 units of Exalted 8-bound on top of regular 8-bound, but the day that I need to do that, I'm ready to go. So, um, man, a thing I'm not ready to do and haven't done is I like games question mark. Anything Brian's been up to, and I put fuck Brian's life. No, I haven't. I was supposed to get a game in last weekend, or I had the potential. There was a game day. Herrick Games did their grand opening thing on a Saturday. The big problem is not just life hasn't just gotten into the way. It's also my Hapkido class moved to Tuesdays and Thursdays, which are the 2 nights a week that Harrod Games was open. And they don't do weekend events anymore. So that means I have to coordinate with people to play at their house, because playing at my
Mm,
house is just out of the question right now. And so, yeah,
that does make it harder.
it's been a little rough, but there's a Necromunda campaign that Josh is going to run that I'm going to play Goliaths in finally, and
Sweet.
that'll kick off on the first. So at the latest, I will get a couple of games in on the first, and that's that. So what's your gaming bit there?
So the length of time we've not talked has enabled me to look like I've played a bunch of games. What I've actually done is played some games over a long period of time. So the first thing, and I did post some pictures from this, is there's a convention that the University of Idaho does that's a little bit before finals. That's essentially a both video and board and miniatures game thing that's sponsored by a couple companies in the area, and our local wargaming club always gets a couple tables. We ran a little mini 40K event that I had nothing to do with, and then we have a bunch of people who always stop by and are like, oh, what's this? And so we're trying to use it sort of as a recruiting event. So we took a game done by a British company called what a storm sorry what a cowboy, which is by Two Fat Lardies, and we changed it to What a Stormtrooper, because we figured everybody likes uh, Star Wars. It's easy
Mhm.
to explain, and Star
Yeah,
Wars is at its heart just a Western.
right.
So we sort of printed up and then painted real quick 4 demo armies. We had 2 of the Trandoshan, the big lizard guys, with essentially shotguns as one group. We had some remnant stormtroopers, so the guys in Mandalorian who are using, cobbled together armor and have been largely abandoned. We had Timothy Oliphant's sheriff and 2 rebels as one group, and then we just had 2 Mandalorians who looked awesome and like Mandalorians. The sort of twist we had is we also had the little Grogu guy who would wander around the field based on a scatter dice. And if you shot at him, shot over him, got in a fight near him, or died near him, he'd get upset, and the actual Mandalorian would come and rescue him and promptly shoot his way to one of the table edges, usually immediately murdering the person who upset his little baby friend. And so that was fun. We essentially TO'd a bunch of demo games with folks. It was really fun to see people play. There's one person who I also talked about on my other show, who there was a girl who was with 2 of her friends. They had a little bit of time before the event, and they were like, "So can we play?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she understood the game in like half a turn, and it was
Hmm.
just fun to watch it, like all the rules sort of click in her mind, and then she started just dismantling her friends. um, and so I was like, I see you have potential. Here's our flyer.
Right.
So that was a lot of fun. It was great fun. It was weird for a demo game. We found it worked best with 3 players, because that prevented the forces we were using were pretty small. So once someone started dying, they'd sort of spiral. But 3
Mhm.
players tended to prevent that from happening. So that was a lot of fun. Past that, I've been playing a lot of Silver Bayonet, which is a Napoleonic Gothic horror game. So basically, uh, what if Mordheim but Napoleonics, or what if Napoleonics but there's also vampires? Are the 2 ways to describe it. I think it's a really great game. It's got a lot of narrative behind it. Also, I am as of a while ago, although I haven't written anything for it yet because I'm behind on everything. I am one of the historicals writers for Goonhammer now, and one of the reviews I'm working on is the Canada supplement for Silver Bayonet. So I've been playing a lot of that to get an actual feel for it. And then the last thing, which was actually pretty recent, was a 3,000 point Titanicus game per side. I had intended for it to be a 2,000 point per side Titanicus game where me and my buddy Rob were going to smash our giant robots together. And then another friend of mine, Jeff, who I was delivering that night, the so-called Lesser Wall of Jeff, which is an 8 foot long 3D printed fortification. Uh, they were like, "Hey, do you have time to get a game in tonight?" And I was like, "I've already got one scheduled, but if I toss my War Master into my bag and my Loner Maniple, we can have a 2v3 game, 2v1 game of Titanicus. And so that's what happened is my standard Maniple plus a War Master faced off against two of their Maniples. And contrary to our previous episode, where both of us expressed that we were skeptical that a War Master was any good, the War Master in this one went absolutely ham. I think partially because I decided it wasn't very good, and so I went after weak targets.
Hmm.
So like I started by erasing a unit of knights, and then I sort of worked my way up to warhounds. And I think the thing I was struggling with for the War Master, which we mentioned, is that it doesn't have a lot of autonomous void shield cracking power. Like it needs
Right.
a helper. If you're going after a warhound, your helper doesn't need to be that good
Right.
before the voids on the warhound go down, and
Yeah.
then you can just sink a ton of shots and kill a warhound. So that's sort of what happened. Is I just like every turn that titan and somebody else would go, I don't like that warhound, and that warhound would go
Hmm.
away. It was a really fun game. We had a couple of the proper, an explosion turns into another explosion, and three titans die in the span of a single turn. And at the end of it, you sort of go, okay, what whose turn was it when these all started dying?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm going to work it into the narrative campaign we're playing. That the traders decided to try to force the walls of the Hive City with a Titan charge, and promptly got schooled by Legio Astorum. It did end in a landslide victory for the Loyalists. I destroyed everything but their warlord when we decided to call it a game. I had in exchange lost one Reaver and one Reaver that was heavily damaged, um, which is a pretty steep victory.
Yeah.
I will say the Reaver that was heavily damaged survived an improbable amount of fire heading its way. It had a lot of the other guy's melta cannon takes off a weapon that gets repaired the next
Mm.
turn and then
Yeah.
takes off.
Yeah.
Like I had
Yeah.
my chain bayonet thing disabled like 8 times, but it didn't matter because okay, I'm not in you yet. It doesn't matter that I
Right.
can't charge you when I'm at a distance. So
Yeah.
yeah, it survived an improbable amount of fire. But it was a really fun game. So that's what I've done over the past embarrassingly couple months.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our games played.
Cool. Yeah, and next time I'll actually be able to add something to that. It's been a rough dry spell over here, but the dam's about to break. So, well, let's take a break here, and then we'll go ahead and jump into our segment. So we're gonna go ahead and discuss what we mean by theming an army and what that actually looks like. Okay, so if we're talking theming an army, I think there's a pretty big difference between talking a themed army and narrative, right?
Yeah, so I think you can have one of those or both of those, and they're not the same thing. So
Yeah.
when we say theme, we're sort of thinking about this is a coherent force that looks and feels like something that is in the universe we're playing in and
Hmm.
plays appropriately for that.
Right.
What we're not talking about for this is narrative that, oh, these guys are the hero of X battle. Let me tell you about my 14th level paladin.
Right.
Like, we're not talking about here is the series of fanfic that goes along with my Lehman Russ tank. If you want that, that's great. There are definitely armies I
Yeah.
have that,
Yeah.
but that's also not necessarily a good theme. Like you can write a narrative about the tournament spec rule of three based army, and you cannot about a themed army. So yeah, what we're talking about for this is the idea of an army that feels correct and
Hmm.
feels like something that comes out of the world we're playing in.
Yeah. That's what I always have a hard time because I enjoy going to events that are like narrative based, right? Where you're getting into the game and you're like, here's the thing you're on X side, or you're some sort of free agent X factor here that's coming in, and agents of disruption or whatever the fuck. And your job is to do this. This is what the greater, like I enjoy those things because it kind of gives me a frame rather than just we're trying to kill each other. Because just trying to kill each other gets down to you're going to take efficient units that do, in a list with redundancy that does the things you need to score the points to say I won at the end of the game. Um, I don't. I enjoy playing narrative style games, but I'm not. I have literally never named a character in any of my armies unless it's like a requirement for an event, and then I go straight up to it. Either I go one of two ways: I find name generators, or I just start going with dick jokes. Like those are the two speeds that I have, because I don't give a fuck. Well, it's not that I don't give a fuck. I don't do the fan fiction thing. And but the thing that's important to me is that when I put down an army, like, I'm working on my Heresy World Eaters right now. When I put them down, the people that play against them, they don't look at that. I don't get any side eye for taking a unit, because every unit looks like something that should be in a World Eaters army. It's not just unit X is super fucking awesome, so I'm going to max out those slots to interact with my Rite of War or whatever I'm doing. Like that's not what I'm doing. And so for me, it's not just the way that it should play. It's also something that looks interesting visually, because the theme will actually help me to kind of tie the units together and have something to work towards, rather than all the colors are correct on it and it fits into a list and it'll play.
Yeah, and I think that that visual element is a big part of it for me too. Because while I do name all my characters,
Mm-hmm.
I think there is, you can sort of stumble now with how the detachments work. You can sort of stumble into a fairly thematic army by just pick a detachment and figure out what
Mm-hmm.
units work best for that detachment.
Yeah.
But often I don't think that, like, and you get some theme from that, but often I don't think it feels particularly coherent.
Yeah.
But I think the visual element can help you telling a lot about the story of your army. So, for example, for my Adeptus Titanicus force, my guys are Legio Astorum. Famously, they're AKA the Warp Runners. Famously, they teleport into battle.
Right.
My guys aren't very heavily weathered.
Mm-hmm.
Because as far as I'm concerned, if we're teleporting into battle, we should look pretty fucking good while that
Right.
happens. So
Right.
we're not doing the, like, we've slogged through hundreds of kilometers in mud and ash.
Right.
Nah, no, that's not how we do. We just showed up. We're good. And so deciding things like that. So, or even little things like my Imperial Fists are intended to be a Void War force. They have lots of chipping, but it's only from the front,
Right. Right.
because that's where the enemy is.
Right.
If they're behind, the guys who got hit from behind are dead now. So
Right.
they're not in this force. And so
Right.
that visual element, picking up that, making it so when you put it down, you're like, yeah, that's obviously this army. Is sort of one of the things we're going for, and that's both an army composition thing. What are you putting down, and then
Yeah.
thinking about how you want to sort of display those things.
Mm-hmm. So it was interesting. Like, we came up with the idea for this episode a while ago, and since then is when I've kind of pieced together how I want my, like we talked last time about the Rite of War that I want to go for and different things like that. Like all that stuff makes sense. I mean, that's the play style thing. But then it was when I was thinking about visually how I want this stuff to tie together, because I do have the problem of I'm painting all these new like Mark 6 things in, the mid to late heresy white with red, with the same
Mm-hmm.
gold that the other ones have. They're beat to hell, just like everything else. Actually, they're probably not weathered as much as my older Mark II stuff used to be. But I was looking at it and I was like, okay, so the right of this is where there's kind of a combination where it's like, yes, I'm not completely steering into a theme based on a thing. The idea for what this army should look like kind of came out of me balancing those two things of I have some stuff that's in the old, if I want to use my old Venator that's in the white and blue, so I have some older style vehicles that are done that I'll feel comfortable using, like the dick bikes, um, the Sky Hunters or whatever the fuck they're called now. The ones that I have that are in the Mark IV, the resin ones, they aren't going to look that ridiculous compared to the infantry that are walking around that are way too goddamn small. So I was like, okay, I'm going to replace all of those, but I really want to do Mark II units and those kinds of things. And then I was like, as I was painting these Mark VI ones, all the Mark VI stuff is going to get done with white and red, period. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, even so, the Rite of War, the Berserker Assault, I'm like, okay, that one just plays the way that I want to play. The other one that they have, the Crimson Path, seems like a weird, like, you ignore the first wound. It feels like a game mechanic thing, and it feels less like you're world eaters, you're maniacs. They're charging forward, and that's at any stage of the war, but especially towards the end. But then when I was looking at it, you can make the army that winning is a theme. So when I was looking at the Butcher's Claws as a warlord trait, so that's the one where they get +1 strength. The unit that they join gets +1 strength. It's a very and the idea is supposed to be that they've sort of like mastered control of the nails and these kinds of things. And but so I was thinking, I was like, well, how the fuck am I justifying this? And this, it'll sound like winning is the theme, but I was like, in trying to explain some of the newer and the older stuff. So instead of saying, well, I have a bunch of newer, older guys that are turning and changing the uniform colors and everything like that, the Mark II units and the Mark III units that I want to add to this army are going to be done in the white and blue, the traditional. They're going to be a lot more beat up. And that's just what we're going to do. The all the newer stuff is going, the Mark VI stuff is in the white and red. And so I was thinking, well, what if we have, I don't want to come up with a whole backstory for it, where it's like, oh, well, they were, there was they were delayed to Isfahan 3 because, I don't know, the fucking warp or some bullshit, and so they're not really trusted. And, you can come up with some whole bullshit story, but it's like, for some reason, this company is on the outs. The Praetors, is not sort of like, his company's not rolled in with other veterans or that kind of a thing. And it's just kind of like, this guy just keeps getting thrown into the shit. He keeps giving, all these new fuckwit recruits that are, all vat born, clones that are sort of in or vat born, inducti type things and all that. And it's like, it just seemed like, for some reason I kept coming back, and it was like, and is this, I hope this doesn't sound like some bad, like, Camus ripoff or something like that, but it was kind of like this, thinking about a Praetor who's just like, realizes that he's never going to get reunited with other former warhounds and things like that, that he's just going to keep, the company that he has is just going to keep getting, the veterans that he knows are just going to keep getting whittled down. He's just going to keep getting backfilled with all of these newer, recruits that, have all these sort of stolen valor, combat memories that are just implanted in their brains and everything like that. And it's kind of like, this is kind of the weird Camus angle on it. It's like, he's kind of found acceptance with that. It's just like, in the end, you're just supposed to kill, and that's all that it is. It really doesn't matter, kind of a thing. And so for me, it was like two birds, one stone. I get to keep some of the white and blue that I love painting, but use that on more of the older, like Mark II and Mark III stuff. And then all the new Mark VI stuff, those are all brand new, fuckwits that are, in white and
Yeah.
red. And, I can use, those are the ones that I can use berserker heads on, that have the, marks of corn, scarred in their foreheads and things like that. Cause I mean, I'm trying to really show, like, towards the end of the war, this is where this company is just kind of getting shoved, and
And
that's
it
where it
works for the
goes.
tanks and things like that. Like, no, your Karens are not going to get taken off the line long enough to get repainted.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you wanted them red, kill more people.
Yeah.
I think I think that's a good theme, and sort of similarly with, I was thinking back on sort of like, how did I start theming my Eldar, which is the first army that I really wanted themed well, was
Mm-hmm.
sort of the opposite idea. I was like, they're Eldar Corsairs. Craftworld Eldar are pretty vain. So my two concepts for it were, they were going to not be weathered at all, because if you can psychically control the shape of your vehicles, you're going to make them clean. Like,
Right.
some bone singer is just going to pop out and do a psychic car wash on everything. And then the other thing I just wanted was that these were supposed to be fast. These were supposed to be
Right.
raiders. So my idea was, nothing has to touch the ground unless it wants to.
Mm-hmm.
So everything's on a jet bike in a wave serpent. Somehow you only have to touch the ground if you choose to.
Hmm.
And for some reason, someone referred to that as the the floor is lava tactic.
Right.
And I just like that worked really well as a way to build this army in a way that looked coherent, to try to avoid that temptation of like, yeah, but Wraith Lord's really good, so maybe we add a Wraith Lord.
Yeah.
I accidented in. I started this in 6th edition, so I'm only going to take jet bikes and wave serpents. Wasn't exactly a huge sacrifice on my part,
Right.
though I didn't know that at the time. But since then, I mean, that's been the sort of guide for it, and it's been that similar. Like, no, I don't need a 15-word essay on their choices. It was just like they're vain, and
Right.
they're just vain, and that's the element behind it.
Sure.
And so I think that's part of it, and it does help with that. And I think the stuff you've talked about with the world eaters is really good, especially for heresy, because you can
Hmm.
do that. Like, where in the war are we,
Yeah.
and what does
Yeah.
that mean?
Right. And that was the thing too with the veterans in keeping the original colors. It's also that I can spend more like Mark 6 models. And this isn't a knock on the models. I mean, they're fine. They're, there's 5 poses repeated over and over again. And they're fine, but Mark 6 armor isn't exactly the flashiest armor on the face of the planet. It's not all that exciting. Like the Mark 2 stuff, the Mark 3, well, I mean, the new Mark 3s are also a little stripped down basic, but for the veterans, that's where all of my big units that are like 20-man units are going to be the Mark 6 ones. These are the fresh ones right off the
Mm-hmm.
line. They don't have a transport because it's like, look, they're lunatics. They're gonna braveheart it straight across the field. That's what you have. That lets me put, veteran units, or I mean not actual veterans, but I mean I can have a unit of 10 tacticals that are, I get to do a little more converting on and have them, have a little more character. And, that could be the unit that's running around in a rhino, and like
Yeah,
rules wise, I don't have to use veteran units or whatever. It can just reflect that, these are the ones that's the unit that's whittled down and they're running around. And the thing is, I mean, it'll end up feeling like a World Aegis army period because it's, a shitload of infantry that are just slamming straight across the field, so it's I don't think anybody's going to look at it because yes, the Rite of War is a very ideal one for world eaters, and that warlord trait is probably the gamiest one that they can take, but it also feels like a world eaters one, so as long as it's I'm not going to have that praetor leading a unit of 20 Mark 6 guys because it doesn't really fit with the theme. And so the whole like they get +1 to their strength doesn't really come in all that much, especially with, I mean, at a minimum, they're running around with chain axes anyway, so they're probably already, beating T5 by 1, so it doesn't really come into play as much. So,
yeah.
but so that's that part of it. Um, we got we got stuck in a little weird place because when you came up with this episode, the sample army that I wanted to do, I was like, oh, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I was like, word bearers are one of those armies that I've always thought that I should do, but never will do. But I was like, there's definitely a theme and things that they can do with them. Then they done had to go release the codex early, and everybody's reviewed it, and you can't unknow what you've heard in those things. So, do we want to knock that one out, or do we want to do your Tau one? Because your Tau one actually is interesting and has some thought into it.
So we can go ahead and do the tell one.
Okay.
And then we'll close out with the word bearers because they should
Yeah.
come last, like they always do. Um, so the idea for this was, and for sort of the idea for this section was like, let's theme an army that is not an army we're gonna play. Like, this is not, let's theme
Mhm.
Eric's Imperial Fists or Brian's World Eaters. This is, let's just pick something that we think there's a cool theme for that we're not gonna
Mhm.
do. And so mine is, I described it as what if Tau, but also Vietnam. And so the idea behind this is that this is a Tau unit that when the galaxy went to hell in a handbasket is sort of cut off. This is that,
Mhm.
they sort of allude to this in some of the stuff right in the sort of 8th, 9th, and 10th edition stuff that like, yeah, there was this whole sphere expansion and then, oops, warp storms. And now there's like little bits of Tau everywhere. And the question is, what if one of these groups? So they're cut off. They don't have a lot of support to them, and they're now sort of doing a largely sort of guerrilla war.
Mhm.
So the modeling concept for this, because I started with modeling and then we'll move to gameplay, because this is really I
Right.
wanted to see this first. Is using some stuff that's sort of very unusual visual themes for the Tau. So camouflage, uh, very heavy weathering, lots of battle damage that's been repaired, potentially even repaired with like not Tau stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, there's a hole in the side of the tank. There's a blown up rhino. We have a welder. Let's fix that.
Yeah.
I desperately want to. I've seen this. I think I saw this once on like Cool Mini or Not, like a decade and a half ago, of someone who did a devilfish that was missing the side doors and instead had Fire Warrior door gunners. I think that's the coolest possible thing that could ever be done with that model.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to see. I'd love to see like Tau tanks with like netting over them to
Mhm.
disguise them, and sort of that idea that like some of the technology is breaking down. We can't do the really sort of either Gundam style or sort of Tron style paint schemes that we see for the Tau a lot, where it's very bright, it's very hard edged. So that's sort of the modeling for this. Is I think that would be really cool and would really separate this army from what we think of a normal Tau army, where you've got
Right.
these really clean, really slick battle suits coming down. So for gameplay for this, the idea is one of the things I often end up doing when I'm talking about theming an army is asking, what can't I take?
Mhm.
What are the things that will sort of violate the theme of this army?
Yeah.
If you're doing like an air mobile guard army, uh, Bane Blades probably not going to show up. Similarly for this one, what I'm looking for is fast, hard hitting, and highly mobile, and lacking in the super big ponderous suits. If you're trying to hide from the Imperium because you're basically stuck in hostile space, uh, wandering around with a storm surge is a good way to get spotted. So my guess is whatever in the history of this unit, the couple storm surges they had got taken out pretty early. Similarly, not taking a lot of aircraft because you don't have an air base. You have sort of a shitty camp surrounded by devilfish, and that's wherever you're based. So the idea is to do that nicely in this latest codex. There's the Montcad attachment, which I sort of picked as sort of the rough list for this because early game lethal hits seem neat.
Mhm.
Um, I think with a lot of games, the early game is really important, and it sort of represents to me a unit where if things haven't gotten untangled pretty early, they're possibly in trouble. This is not a force that's really looking forward to a protracted battle. It also feels not terribly locked to particular units. There's like I think it's the retaliation cadre feels very much like so you want to take battle suits,
Mhm.
and then similarly the Kroot one feels like the Kroot one. So for this, I take something like a battlesuit commander. Again, I think that would be cool if it's sort of a weathered, sort of beaten up battlesuit. Several of the cadre fireblade infantry guys, both because I think it's sort of cool and fits the theme of this is being held together by sort of hard bitten NCOs who
Yep.
have seen some things.
Yeah.
And then also their rules are really good in terms of increasing volume of fire, which if you've got lethal hits in the first 3 turns of the game is something you're going to want to see. Uh,
Yeah.
Kroot characters to taste, pun with Kroot and eating things. And then my choice for this was no special characters because right now we don't have any special characters who are canonically trapped behind enemy lines, and
Mhm.
no ethereals. Because if there was an ethereal missing, the Tau would have gone looking for them.
Right.
These are guys
Right.
who, sort of like your commander, have been written off. Somewhere there's a computer that just has this whole detachment is missing in action, and that's okay. For units, breachers in Devilfish because that feels correct. Also, and this is where like a themed army doesn't have to be a bad army.
Right.
Breachers and Devilfish can get up close real fast, and for those first
Yes.
3 turns, can put out an awful lot of firepower. Where even if they're
Yeah.
fishing for sixes for lethal hits, they're going to get some.
Yeah.
Pathfinders again seem thematic. Kroot in their various forms again seem thematic. Generally speaking, we're talking about more tanks and less suits than you'd expect for a normal Tau army.
Hmm.
Piranhas again feel appropriate. Crisis suits, ghost keels, I think are like as large as I would go. And for the ghost keels, I put here bonus points if you model or paint the stealth system struggling. So rather than it being like fully stealth, maybe it's like flickering in and out. Maybe you've decided to cover it in, you know, camouflage netting or something like that. So it's still a
Hmm.
little bit sneaky, but it needs some help. And then
Yeah.
broadsides is sort of your heavy guys versus like, you know, going back to when I think of the Tau, because I was introduced to them when they were introduced. The broadside was like, oh my god, that's the heavy battle suit.
Yeah.
Now it's like sort of a medium battle suit. So I
Yeah.
would skip like riptides and storm surges because again, I think those suits, if this force had them at the beginning, those have been abandoned as leaving the storm surge behind to hold as you retreat and things like that. And
Hmm.
you've just sort of slowly lost those over time. And so that's sort of the idea behind this army is this sort of battered, weathered, abandoned Tau army
Hmm.
that is still fighting and sort of has that sort of just keep going and eventually we might make it home. But like everybody sort of knows that every time something gets wrecked, it's the last one of those we have,
Right.
and sort
Right.
of that feel for it.
Yeah, and like you were mentioning, I mean, it's a functional list. It's not, you aren't dying. What was it? Splinter Mind. What was it that we'd always say? Dying on Fluff Bunny Hill. Because some people they'll ride their theme straight into the side of the mountain on fire. And with this one, like, there's a bunch of functional things. I mean, it's an army that wants to move around a lot, and you have all the little pieces that you can use to pick things off and do what you need to do. So and also too, just again, you had me at Fire Warriors in Door Gunners, on Devilfish. Like, that's, people would love to see this army, and
Yeah,
it would play and it would make sense.
yeah.
Um,
I feel like if you did this right, you would be in contention for best painted at most non like national
mhm.
scale events.
Yeah,
I think you put it down and people would be like, "Oh, cool."
yeah,
Um, which
yeah,
for which for people who are playing Tau, having your opponent react to anything other than "oh" is probably good.
yeah.
Um,
Other than wins lunch again.
yeah,
Um,
and I think that's the thing is like people aren't going to expect a Tau
mhm,
army to want to go rocketing forward
mhm,
the first turn and be like, "Okay, you want to meet me in the middle? My guys shoot 3 shots apiece, hit on threes, and do lethals on
mhm.
sixes."
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And so there's a lot of stuff there that I think is makes for a good game. Because
yeah,
as much as I admire the occasional people who have decided to die on Fluff Bunny Hill and that their narrative is that they lose, most people want a good and interactive game, and I think this
yeah,
would give people a good and interactive game. You have
hmm,
lots of cool units. You get to use
yeah.
all the neat new Tau and Kroot stuff, and so I think there's a lot for this that still makes it a functional army. And yeah, I think it would look great on the tabletop and not like everybody else's Tau.
It seems like it also would play. I, I mean, it's been a minute. I've played 0 games against Tau in 10th edition, so I can't really comment on this. But to me, just looking at it and how those units function, it feels like a game that would be. It looks like it would play out if it was done correctly, more like an interactive chess match with movements and counters and these sorts of things than the usual Tau thing where it's like, I'm gonna weather your janky shooting bullshit and then I'm gonna hit your lines, and then if you haven't scored enough points, I'm gonna score all the points for the last 3 turns, and the
Yeah,
game
the sort of
swings one way or the
theory
other.
I've had for why people don't like playing the Tau, because if you look at it
Hmm.
for a long time, the Tau have statistically not been a terribly powerful faction, but still one
Hmm.
that's like hated. Like I get
Yeah,
why people hate the Eldar is because they've been amazing for like several editions now, and I get
yeah,
it. For the Tau, I've always been like, but wait, they're not that good, and I
yeah.
think it's that it's not a fun game.
It's not.
Because yeah, the first 3 turns are I take models off the table,
Hmm.
and then the last 3 turns are okay. Now I'm in your lines, and your little fishmen are dying in the droves.
Hmm.
And then at the end we figure out if more of my guys died in the first 3 turns than your guys died in the last 3 turns, and what did
Yeah,
that mean? And so yeah, I
yeah.
feel like this one's much more interactive. You have some really cool things in here like Crute now can make objectives sticky. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, you tag those backfield objectives, and then the Crute can go moving forward.
Yeah.
Things like that. You've got the piranhas have a hilarious. You pick a unit within 12 inches of them, and they have to take a battle shock test, essentially because they're throwing little drones at them. I think that's both hilarious visually, and then also, but the piranha has to be within 12 inches of you.
Right.
So like, there's a lot of, I think, more interaction. There's a lot more movement than the sort of classic big battle suit gun line. And yeah,
Yeah.
that like, okay, for the first 3 turns, you just wreck my shit, and then I get one unit of assaulty troops into you, and that's the end.
Yeah. So for the word bearers list that popped into my head as soon as you mentioned the idea for this is, again, word bearers to me always feel like the army that I should see more of. I mean, these guys should be the poster boys for chaos, right? Like they're and the thing is, all the things that make chaos armies unique, I feel like really scream word bearers to me. So when you're getting into possessed, yes, I want to see a bunch of those in a word bearers list. Um, cultists and the weird dark commune. Now it's a bolt-on unit instead of its own unit. I want to see a lot of that stuff. I want to see a cursed cultist. Like I want to see an army that really just steers into and celebrates the weirdness of chaos. And so you can go, for heavy support, of course, with defilers, throwing things like that out, demon engines, all those things. And when I picture a word bearer's army, the one that I've always wanted to see is somebody doing, the Dark Apostle, of course, is one that you have to do some sort of a chaos lord, chuck a sorcerer in there too, just for good measure. But I want to see units of possessed, a couple of big units of accursed cultists, big units of cultists that are there to die and just clog up the board and force you to make bad choices rather than, I have 10 that are sitting back on an objective. Normal legionnaires, because you have to throw them in there. But I mean, even within those, there are options like, the Bale Tome upgrade. I mean, that's an obvious thing that you would want to do steering into that. And again, the possessed as well. So you can have sort of that, some of the, accursed cultists, or, even throwing beastmen in there, charging forward, these chaff units. But I mean, also you're going to be forced to choose between mowing a lot of those things down or putting concentrated fire into possessed units. And either way, one of those things are going to get there and are going to do it. And, being with a mob army like that, they're going to want to do, it's going to be kind of a board control slash Braveheart type of charge thing. And so that, to me, that was the idea behind the army and what I wanted to see. Now, with the new index that's out, and this is kind of inadvertently rolling into our segment talking about 40K, and kind of where we're both kind of having trouble wrapping our heads around it a little bit, is they previewed the 8 different detachments that are going to be in the Chaos Space Marine book. And there's one that what is it, the Packbound Zealots, right? And you're like, oh, this is the Word Bearers one. And as you read each of these, you're like, oh, clearly this is like the Vashtor Demon Engine one. This is clearly the Iron Warriors one. This is clearly the Night Lords one, and that kind of a thing. It's, when you look at it, it's one of these things where you're giving out marks for free, and when they go to do these dark packs things, they're going to just turn them up a little bit higher, because it's just, we're not just snorting chaos, we're also shooting it up. And it's kind of where, when I was looking, I was trying to figure out, okay, well, based on what I know on the unit changes, how would I plug that army back into this one? And I really kind of started having a hard time figuring out how I would want to do that. And it to me, it came back to kind of a thing with 10th edition that, I mean, it's only been out for a year, and I played games with it over the summer, and then there was like all the life stuff, father-in-law dying, all that kind of stuff that happened, that's kept me from playing a lot. a 40K. But I think that's one of the things that I'm having the biggest struggle with, and why heresy is kind of becoming something that I'm looking towards more, is that moving away. I understand the move getting away from, chapter tactics or legion traits, whatever the deal is. I understand that move. The thing where I struggle with it though is it. I'm trying to figure out how to put this. It changes what I mean. There's some of the detachment abilities that clearly favor certain types of units. And so if you're like, I want to take the word bearers one, but I want to lean into kind of a siege, you're gonna have to wade through a body, we're gonna have the hordes of the mortal believers that are out in front of us, and we're gonna have, havocs and all kinds of gunline stuff, and the glory of chaos, whatever. It just doesn't, the detachments I feel really steer you into particular builds more than they did before, which from a game design standpoint, I understand that, because that it's easier to balance. It's hard to balance the abilities of a vindicator, and then you have alpha legion, you have, I mean, like word bearers, all these different ones that you have to worry about how their keywords interact with
Yeah,
abilities and all these
you have a
sorts of
bunch of
things.
combinations where it's so easy to be like, I did not think of that, and then
Yeah,
like, okay, why are there a bunch of demolishers in Alpha Legion armies? Is like, well, because
turns
if you read
out.
the second sentence,
Yeah, yeah. And so I think that's where, in trying to like actually hash out this list, assuming points are roughly of where they were, that's where I was having a hard time kind of running through it, because I was like, well, how would it play interacting with um the obviously word bearers detachment, and it started killing it for me, to be honest. So um I don't know. That's
sort of
Yeah.
ends on a sad note. But I think
Yeah.
I agree with sort of the feeling you were going for is when I
Mhm.
picture the word bears as you were talking about it. When I picture the world eaters, I
Mhm.
picture the space marines in front. When
Yes.
I picture the word bearers, I picture the space marines in back and going, yeah, yeah, go for it.
Right.
The eyes of the four are upon you.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think like I really like that idea of sort of my mental summary as you were coming up with this is like people who made promises to things they shouldn't have.
Yes.
And I really like that idea. And I haven't read enough of the Chaos Codex to figure out how to make that yet, but I think it's a really cool theme of that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, these are people who have fully sold out.
Yes.
Um, if you read like the Black Legion books or the end of the Horus Heresy and Siege of Terra books, Abaddon is very, you know, controlled, not like in control, not controlled, etc., etc. He's still got this notion that he's in charge.
Mhm.
I like the idea of word bearers. Like, oh no, like we have fully gone into this.
Yeah.
We know we're screwed, and that's okay
Yes.
because look, I have a second arm and it's got a claw.
Right. Right.
And so I think I like that. I like that concept. And I think I want it to be doable. I'm just not sure how.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and that is one of the things. And this is what I was struggling with because like when we came up with this idea, similarly the Tau Codex had not came out, and then the Tau Codex came out and was like, oh, please let one of the detachments work for this.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the things is deciding, and this is one of those things that narratively you do have to decide is how much do you want to compromise
Mhm.
how good your army is, or whether or not everything speaks to the detachment rules.
Mhm.
So there is, for example, there's a second aspect to the Montcalm detachment for the Tau that involves if a unit is guided, it gets assault and things like that. How many crew you bring to this will change how many units get to benefit from that, because the crew don't benefit from the greater good.
Mm.
And so there is this question of like, but the crew are also not really meant to do it.
Yeah.
And so like there's always, I think, some interesting compromises with that. And one of the reasons for a while I was going to make a Yunari Eldar army was because I could play with all the units I don't allow myself to play with for the regular Eldar. But yeah, I really like that as a theme. And I've always liked that aspect of the word bearers where it's like, nope, we've got demons, we've got possessed,
Hmm.
like we are shoving demons inside our legionnaires. It's fine. Don't ask questions.
Yep.
And so I really like that theme. And hopefully there's a way to get it to work.
Yeah.
I think GW has for a while struggled with like, is the Chaos Space Marines Codex a Chaos Space Marines Codex, or is it a greater Chaos what's its Codex?
Mm.
And they sort of swing back and forth.
Yeah.
Um, and I always wonder where they're going to land.
Yeah. And it's, again, when, I mean, of course, I'm reading through other people's summaries of the things. I haven't read them, and this is one of those things. I don't know what I don't know if there's any kind of turn. I'm assuming it's the same people writing that were doing it, you know, last edition when we were kind of working with them and doing their thing. So it's not. I don't in any way. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, this is just a thing to sell models," and it's like maybe the accounting department, but the rules department, the people that work there aren't going into it with that mindset, honestly. And I know that they're trying to balance this thing, and I wonder if, to me, the weird feeling on it that comes through, because I mean, I don't know what the Space Marine detachments look like, but I assume there's the Imperial Fists, we like to shoot bolters one, and the Raven Guard, we like to be stealthy and dance around one. But it's like having chapter, it's harder to balance, but having something like chapter tactics or legion traits allows you can take an Imperial Fist, you know, reserve company, that's all of the sort of the assault stuff. And it's like if it doesn't interact well with their primary trait, with bolter drill or whatever the hell the thing is, that's fine, because I mean, they all of the chapters in the case of Space Marines or legions are going to have some sort of a thing. I mean, World Eaters had heavy companies, that were Devastator type companies. Um, and you should have a way to try to play that. It's like, okay, it doesn't interact in the best way possible, but it at least makes some sort of sense. And there's a way of distinguishing, like, okay, so to use the World Eaters example, if you were playing something where you're leaning in really heavy into a heavy assault type thing, or a very heavy support type of company where there's a lot of firepower, you get a lot of Devastator units, um, the rapier carriers, these sorts of things. Like, they have those things, and it would exist. And it's like, okay, it doesn't scream World Eaters, but then when people get up close and those people go ape shit and start doing their thing, it'll look like World Eaters, and it'll look like an army, like World Eaters doing something that they're not exactly good at, but it'll feel right. And I don't know if that makes any sense, because that kind of goes against what we were talking about earlier of, you don't want to have an army that's so thematic that you just die on Fluff Bunny Hill for no reason. But at the same time, I don't feel like with taking the Chaos Space Marines Codex, if I take the one that is definitely feels like they're trying to do Iron Warriors, I don't feel like it translates well. And what it starts feeling like to me is like, I remember there was a guy locally, nice enough guy, but I mean, showed up with a Ultramarines bike army and was using Raven Wing rolls because they were just better. And that's what it kind of starts feeling like. I mean, at this point, it's like, with the way that the Chaos Codex is laid out, why paint Black Legion? Why not make this look like a second edition Chaos Army where you have like word bearers units and all this stuff, because you're just using a rule set, and
Yeah.
it starts feeling it. I see where it's easier to balance, but it almost feels like we're kind of getting into like esports territory of managing the game, rather than, yeah, there's some stuff that's weird, and sometimes there's rules that you have to live with for a while that aren't great. And when you show up to a friendly game and somebody wants to use the obviously broken thing, you can go, I'd rather not. But it's kind of all being balanced for like tournament, you know?
Yeah, I think a couple things that sort of we have fully moved into segment 3, whether anybody knows it or not.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I have nicknamed the Slith Struggle Bus because both Brian and I are sort of struggling a little bit with 10th edition, and I think that the detachment system, like I get what they're going for. I think it makes sense from a game balance perspective, but
Mhm.
I have noticed when people talk about their armies, it tends to come in the form of what detachment you're using, what
Mhm.
units you're using, and then what subfaction you're playing.
Yeah.
So, I'm taking there's the Iron Hands one, which I can't remember what it is, but it's essentially take at least one Tech Marine and a shit ton of vehicles and collect your prize.
Mhm.
And that feels like that detachment more than it feels like, oh, I'm playing the Imperial Fists version of that. I'm playing a
Yeah.
Salamander's version of that. Like there's
Yeah.
little quirks in there that like help, but I really struggle with that as a sort of like people start talking about builds.
Yeah.
And there was something recently where I hit a discussion where I hit both the noun build and the noun season in the span of like 2 Discord messages. And I played enough MMOs that I think that actually triggered me, and I was like, nope, don't like that.
Yeah.
And I think this thing is it's making, I think the combination for me of that and that there are no rules for army composition anymore
Mhm.
have made everything feel a little bit gamey.
Mm.
That there is a shorthand for what you're doing, and everything is sort of summarized to builds that probably makes 10th edition a better game.
Mhm.
Like from an absolute and especially from a competitive standpoint,
Yeah.
I think 10th edition is in a pretty good place. Like if you look at the win rates, everything's fine.
Mhm.
Um, but it also really dilutes my interest in it. You know, I built like the couple games I've played recently with my Eldar are very tank heavy and just don't feel right.
Mm.
But the detachment rules work really well with a lot of tanks. Tanks are really good in 10th edition. But it doesn't feel like an army. It feels like I chose the good units.
Yeah.
Um, like in my little party selection screen, I chose my best dudes. Um, and I think that's what I'm really struggling with. It's felt, and I think partially because I think Games Workshop sort of badly overshot the complexity of Crusade
Mm.
towards the end of ninth.
Yeah.
Very few people talk about Crusade anymore.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the voices that were really excited about it, like I'm thinking about like the 40K Badcast, don't talk about it anymore and
Yeah.
have outright said they're not playing it anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfortunate because I think there are some things that then that tends towards fully that let's talk about this game as a game. And so
Yeah.
there's like in the Custodes Codex, which had all kinds of falderah around it. Um, Several of the detachments were like, "This is trash," and I'm like, "Okay, but this is the coolest sounding army I've ever heard for Talons
Right.
of the Emperor." Like you have the Custodes and you have the Sisters of Silence, and they're working together, and the sounds great. Yeah, it's not
Right.
very good, but like, spoiler, most 40K players aren't very good. You'll be fine. Um, like
This isn't why you're going to lose.
people hate to think about this, but like 50% of 40K players are below average.
Yes.
And if you take out the fact that there are a lot of good top tier competitive players in that top 10%, that means the majority of 40K players are below average 40K players.
Yeah.
It's fine. Play the cool faction. This isn't why you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Or convince your buddy to play the other cool sounding faction that's also garbage
Yeah.
and play your garbage armies against each other. And so I think that's it. I think it's suffered for me from a combination of that happening at the same time that I've had more exposure to historicals,
Mm,
almost all of which are narrative driven in some way. I'm like, no, you need a coherent army. Like,
yeah.
if if you're playing British paratroopers on D-Day, you don't get tanks. Why?
Right.
Because the
Right.
tanks aren't there yet.
Yeah.
I know you want some, but they're
Yeah.
not there. Um, and so similarly, you have a lot of things like that. Or with Silver Bayonet, there's a lot of really interesting sort of like there's no way to win a scenario. It's sort of who comes off with the most XP and the fewest losses. So sometimes the answer is like dash on, grab a thing, and then be like, okay, bye,
Yeah.
and just running away. And that is a
Yeah.
valid tactic and probably a good idea.
Right.
And so I think that there's a lot of things like that where there has been more games that have sort of an interesting narrative focus and things like that that I'm struggling to find in 10th edition. Um, Partially because I don't think they're as well supported. I miss the little books that they put out with the like 6 missions for each battle type
Yeah.
for the narrative
Yeah.
stuff that were just some of those missions were garbage. Um,
Yeah.
but some of them were really good, and a lot of them were sort of unbalanced.
Mhm.
Um, and I sort of like that because the answer was, well, you're playing a narrative mission; it doesn't have to be balanced.
Right. Right.
Right now, the game feels very much like, I mean, our local group keeps talking about buying various plexiglass foundations for our terrain so we can put them in the GW standard layouts. And I'm like, first of all, those are all going to go away in 11th edition because they will have rethought terrain like they do every single edition of this game.
Yeah.
And also, like, but I don't want to play a standard tournament layout.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like none of those buildings are arrayed in a way a human being would build a city. Why? Why must we do this? And so I think
Yeah.
that's it. Is I think 10th edition is a very good game, but
Mhm.
right now feels to me like a game.
Yeah,
Um,
the game is showing more than the
yeah,
rich background and
yeah,
models.
the game is sticking out a little bit more than
Yeah.
it has
Yeah.
in the past. And then I struggle with like, but when it comes down to it, is that what I wanted? And I don't think the answer is yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all that said, um, yeah, damn it.
I mean, and I
Yeah.
think the thing is like that's not a bad thing.
Mhm.
Like I think it's a very well designed game at this point. But I
Mhm.
think that does in the same way that like if you had like there's a reason there's not a thriving narrative scene for a thriving tournament scene for Silver Bayonet. Um,
Yeah.
any form of this will leave some people behind.
Sure.
And I think
Sure.
both you and I mean, if you just look at our recording schedule, are in the state that like I think Games Workshop doing very frequent, very aggressive adjustments to their points values is essential for a healthy competitive scene.
Mhm.
For
Yeah.
me, it means every time I play a game, I need to rewrite my list.
Yeah.
And so I'm a little bit done with that.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, like I can design a heresy list, paint the models for the heresy list, and anticipate that heresy list will not be wildly different by the time I arrive.
Yeah.
Whereas that is at this point 40k is too fast for me.
Yeah.
And I can't, which is fine, but like that means I definitely can't go to narrative competitive events because I am not current with anything.
Yeah.
And the whole like, oh crap, I need to repaint some stuff because X, Y, and Z has been changed. It's like, okay, cool. I'm a play with the old version.
Yeah.
So I think it's a thing that like any decision they make here will
Mhm.
leave somebody behind.
Yeah.
And in this case, I think a little bit it's us.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of at peace with that because like I've got Legions Imperialis, I've got Horus Heresy, I've got
Mhm.
all the historicals. Um, they'll allow me to do things, and I think that like what's interesting is I think the enthusiasm for some of this stuff is still there. And we'll talk about this next episode. Like we currently have a long running and very successful Crusade campaign in a club that is now primarily preoccupied with tournament play.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people are still interested. People are still engaged in it. Some of our best tournament players are our most active Crusade players. So I think it's definitely still
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
I just think it's sort of a little bit. This always sort of waxes and wanes, and I think we're a little bit in wanes right now.
You're absolutely right. As far as the pace of the game is, there is a point where you can look at things and say this the pace has changed, or the pace is, well, I mean, the pace has been accelerated because the game wasn't this fast before. As far as changes, you didn't have to look at, what did I put in the notes, the revised update of the errated late quarterly rebalance data slate. Like you you don't have to do that stuff. But the thing is, again, God, I hate to keep coming back to this because it makes me kind of push the 40K models over to the side and have the the heresy stuff front and center. I mean, the thing you said years ago was it's a game that you can hold in your head and have ready to go. But that said, this summer I am going to give 40K a good honest go, especially with the new store the location that Sky moved Herrick Games to. There's just room for more things.
That
Are
location
more
looks
guys.
great.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really
I
nice.
think my response to it was I live like 3 states away and still want to organize things at that store.
Yes, yes. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm still, as soon as I get these 5 jump assault marines done that are on my desk. I mean, I just have to do mount them to bases and do the oil streaks and things like that, and they're done. I have 8 bound that are ready to go that I want to paint up and do. So I mean, I'm still painting it, and I think what I'm just going to have to do is just, when I go to dip my toe back into it and go, is just, it's always a classic thing, play like-minded people and figure
Yeah,
out what you want to play and how you want to adjust it, and that'll just
I think that's the
be
thing
good.
is I think neither one of us like hate is a strong word. I don't think either one of us hate 10th edition.
Mm-mm.
It's just sort of the vibes are off.
Yeah.
And I think if you play with like-minded people and sort of do the thing you want to do and make the game be the game you want it to be,
Mhm.
I think there's still a lot of fun to be had there. I mean, a guy in my club, Rob, who was one of my favorite opponents, sent me a message on Discord that was like, "Hey, with that new cultist detachment, do you want to play like a couple 1,000-point games of like a cultist horde versus your Sisters of Battle?" And I was like, "Absolutely, I do."
God,
Like,
yes.
yeah, like no, we're just gonna like my sisters are gonna descend into the Underhive and do some purging. That sounds great.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
I'm gonna design my list so it feels like the Sisters of Battle. He's gonna design a list that's just a bunch of cultists,
Yeah.
and we're just gonna have a good time. And like that sounds amazing. And I'm glad 10th edition enables that shenanigans.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think that's the thing is like I think where I'm at is that like I no longer trust pickup 40K to be something I want to play.
Yeah.
But in fairness, pickup 40K is rarely something I am terribly inclined to play.
True. True.
So like I think it's mostly a like I don't think it's a bad addition or anything like that. I think it's just like the vibes are slightly off and it's lost some of the flavor for I think both of us that
Mhm.
it feels a little bit more like the alternate title for this could be your game is showing. Um because I think that's it. Is it's the pendulum
Yeah.
has swung a little bit more towards game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think both of us are reacting not terribly enthusiastically to that.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, as I'm looking down at my desk and just beyond the 8 bound and the jump marines, I also have a unit of Black Legion Terminators that are ready to go, and I can I definitely still have more time to interact with the painting part of the hobby than the gaming part of it, and that
Yeah.
part isn't going away. That part isn't it, I I haven't found myself saying I don't want to paint 40K because I don't like where the game's at and I feel like the game's showing. Like, I still paint 40K as a
Yep.
percentage as much as I was painting it before. So yeah, I think it'll come around, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and I
I'll
think
see
that's
for
sort of
sure.
the interesting contrast. Is I definitely have more time to game than I do to paint.
Mm,
And for me, it's just the answer is like, yeah, 40K is in the pile.
Yep.
So is a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like that's fine. And like I can, looking at the now closet of opportunity and the hallway of misallocated resources,
Mhm.
um, I could not engage with 40K for a year and still
Yeah.
have a very busy time.
Yeah.
And like be both okay with that and then re-engage with 40K when I want to, because
Yeah.
in contrast to the Games Workshop rights rules to sell models, the Falcon is real good right now. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, my model from 1992 still works. And so I think that's it for me. Is it's just encouraged sort of a broader wandering into the
Yeah.
hobby space than is previous, and I don't think I'm suffering for that.
Nope.
And I still get to play games in the universe I love. Like
Yep.
I I've got Titanicus, Legions, Imperialis, and Heresy.
Mhm.
Uh I could and have filled a whole Nova schedule with those. And just not touch 40K for a bit, and I think that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we can just keep being the 40K adjacent podcast,
Yeah,
and
I
that's what
have
we're doing.
no problem with us being lost in the nails, the 40K adjacent podcast.
Yep. Well, man, it feels weird ending on a note like that, but I guess in the end, yeah. I mean, it's not like we aren't saying 40K is in a weird place. I don't know what I'm doing here. Should we even do another episode, or should I just light this room on fire? Like, no, it's I'm looking forward to working on Angron as soon as my 10 contract days at work are done. I just have to finish the base, and he's going to get chucked on a table as soon as it's done, because I just want to
Because
see what kind of ridiculousness that is.
he's
I don't.
Angron, and that's awesome.
Yeah, you're like, oh, so you're telling me I lost the mission 100-8? I don't care. I got 8 points. So yeah, it's fine.
Indeed.
But so for next time,
If your army's fully painted, you get at least 10 points. So there you go.
well, there you go. Yeah, I'll just leave something unpainted so I can have a. I can have um, so for next time, what do you have
I
on
think
deck?
we're going to talk campaigns,
Okay.
because that is something I'm enthusiastic about, whether or not we're doing 10th
Yeah.
edition. And I think there's a lot of different stuff to talk about that, sort of how we approach campaigns, our
Mhm.
experiences with them.
Yeah.
Um, it'll give me an excuse to try to finish the massive board I've been working on for our local campaign.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's do campaigns.
Yeah. And I have a campaign that's kicking off on June 1st.
Yeah, so
So
that'll give us an excuse to talk about that. Get a little
yeah.
Necromunda mixed in there.
Yep. That works.
All
All
right.
right. Well, so, and when that episode happens, I would love to say we're going to record it in 2 weeks. I don't fucking know. Um,
Yeah. It'll happen when it happens.
yes, my life is about to. Well, these are famous last words. Never mind. I'll just shut the fuck up.
Yeah, do not say that. That
Yeah. Well,
you
I mean,
you play way too much chaos to think that putting that energy out in the world will do anything other than backfire.
this is true. And but I do have a 3-day actual teacher summer, like old school, because
Sweet.
my last day is on a Monday. My kid's last day is on a Thursday. So I have 3 legit days where I'm like, I'm dropping you off at school. I'm picking you up from the Taekwondo after school program. I have all that time in between to do that. And some of it is I have to finish moving the last of this heavy fucking fieldstone down a ramp that I have to build to get into my yard. But there are parts of it where I'm like, I am going to go catch up with somebody and play a goddamn game. So
That sounds awesome.
I will have games next time when we go to record. That's, I don't know when we record, but when we do, I will have games. So
Worst case, the night before.
whatever. I mean, if
Yeah.
is what it is. So, if you'd like to get a hold of us, we do have lost to the nails at gmail.com. Eric, you have all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah. So I can be reached in many, many places. We also have a Discord. We had that as an open invite. We quickly learned that that's not a great idea.
Nope.
So if you're interested in getting a hold of us, I'm on either send us an email and just ask for things. I'm on Twitter at Variance Hammer. I have a whole second podcast, if you really want to hear my voice more, called the Plastic Press Gang Podcast, which is me and a guy named Calvin talking about historicals in a flippant and largely unserious manner. As mentioned, I will start writing for Goonhammer any minute now, trademark. And then I'm on a number of different discords and things like that, usually as Variance Hammer Eric. If you are on the Independent Characters or the 40K Badcast or Goonhammer. So yeah, that's all the various ways to talk to me. Brian, have you fully disengaged with social media yet? Sweet. Why?
No,
A
that's
wise man.
not completely true. I think I still have I have a Facebook account that is just for talking to people that I never get to talk to. And in fact, somebody hunted me down and told me that my 30th high school or 30-year high school reunion is coming up, and I was just like, I forgot
Don't
to
like.
close this account.
Don't like that.
Nah, it'll be funny just to go. But yeah, no, I've got nothing. I have accounts and I don't really look at them. So yeah, for me, the loss of the nails at gmail.com. And I probably open that about every month or two, or right before we go to record. So if there's a lag there, that's what's going on. Contact Eric. He's just a better human being and he responds better than I do.
Yeah,
That's what we're doing.
I remain extremely online. So probably the fastest way to get a hold of me, if you're still on the Hateful Bird site, is at Variance Hammer. But yeah, I'm around in various places. Feel free to reach out.
There you go. All right.
That's a wrap.